One of Minecraft's most popular theories is the dream theory. The dream theory argues that everything you experience in Minecraft, from your adventures to your incredible buildings, didn't really happen. Since every time you die or upon completing Minecraft's main story, you wake up in bed, as if you were asleep the whole time. And this leads to one truly strange fact that will make you never look at Minecraft and dreaming the same way ever again. Whenever I nosedive into bed and huddle between a large comfy blanket, I'm truly met with one of life's greatest joys. And upon falling asleep, you can be taken anywhere your imagination can create. Like one time I dreamed I was Spider-Man, but to my terror, instead of shooting webs, I could only shoot water. And the entire world of Minecraft is no exception to what Steve could imagine while sandwiched between his red sheets. In fact, when we look at the original ideas that Minecraft's creator had for specific areas of the game, paired with dialogue within the game, we get a different look into what the worlds of the game really are, as well as what they aren't. At the very end of Minecraft, we get to see a conversation happening between two higher beings that many have cited as prime evidence for the dream theory. Beings who end their conversation by saying, "And the game was over, and the player woke up from the dream. And the player began a new dream. And the player dreamed again, dreamed better. And the player was the universe. And the player was love. You are the player. Wake up." At the surface, this text definitely looks like it's proposing that Minecraft is the dream world of Steve. But when examining it closer, this text sheds light on the realities of the game and its true message to its players. So to get there, let's first examine Minecraft's overworld. One of the biggest pieces of evidence for the dream theory is that whenever Steve gets run over from a horde of rampaging mobs, burns up in lava, or falls off a mountain, he always wakes up in his bed. Other than this simply being the player's spawn point, one problem with this is that when Steve wakes up in bed and immediately resumes running around the overworld, wouldn't he then be awake? At that point, for the theory to remain true, it would imply that Steve is actually caught in a cycle of endless dreams, where he constantly resets to a new dream every time he dies. Like a dream within a dream, yet within another dream. And don't get me wrong, you can actually experience this weird phenomenon called false awakening, where you're dreaming and then wake up in your bed, go about your day, only to find out later that you are actually still asleep. Some people even experience multiple false awakenings and thus dreams in a row. And this could be what is happening to our comatose Steve. But looking further into why this happens provides us some pretty interesting insights into Steve himself. As false awakenings typically happen when an individual has a feeling of hyperarousal or increased alertness, possibly due to something troubling them, causing their dream to more closely resemble their actual daily surroundings. Steve could be caught in a nightmare cycle of endless dreams. But there's one big hole in this theory. Upon dying in one dream, Steve drops all of his inventory, which floats in the spot of his demise, waiting for him to recollect it in what would be his next dream. And losing a handful of items in one dream, only for them to wait around in the next, doesn't sound very likely. But hey, while that could indeed happen to Steve, and certainly isn't enough evidence to debunk this theory, what about creative mode? You know, that mode that turns Steve into a beefed up god that can create whatever he wants? Well, creative mode does look a lot like Steve is lucid dreaming, where he figures out that he is actually asleep and therefore mobs stop attacking him and he gains the power to do whatever he wants. I mean, according to the University of Adelaide in Australia, individuals can train themselves to lucid dream on a regular basis, allowing them to completely control the environment, characters, and narrative of their dreams. So it sounds like Steve dreaming Minecraft could be a plausible explanation if it wasn't for one overarching problem. You see, whenever Steve goes without sleep for 3 Minecraft days, or would be 1 hour of gameplay, he gets insomnia, and much like in real life, causes him to see phantoms that aren't really there. And these phantoms won't hesitate to attack the player, dealing a small amount of damage, which in reality is a sleep-deprived Steve inflicting self-harm as he wards off a fake spirit. Even more than that, one major point that proves that Steve is in fact awake in the overworld is that phantoms also burn up in sunlight, which makes sense, as even after pulling an all-nighter, a person will naturally feel more awake when the sun comes out. So now that we've debunked Steve dreaming the overworld, examining the true realities of the Nether and the end might might give us some clues as to their true purpose for Steve and the message the game's creator has for those who've beaten them. On its own, the Nether could easily be seen as a nightmarish dream, which is pretty much what it looks like. But if it wasn't for one thing, I wouldn't be able to say that Steve isn't lying in a dream imagining this place. When looking at the supporting evidence that the Nether is a nightmare dream, we see that no phantoms can spawn in the Nether just like they cannot spawn in dreams, although they could follow you through a portal from the overworld into the Nether. But even more, as players know, your bed explodes if you try to sleep on it. And since you can't sleep in a dream, the Nether could very well be seen as just Steve having a nightmare. But you see, while attempting to sleep in a bed causes it to explode for a player, it doesn't explode for everybody. Upon dragging a villager from our awake overworld into the Nether, unlike Steve, they are able to sleep in a bed just fine. And other than the fact that an awake Steve has to jump through a portal to get to the Nether in the first place, a villager also jumping from our real overworld and being able to sleep seems to debunk the Nether being fake. But despite knowing all these things about the overworld and the heck dimension of the Nether, the end has much more supporting evidence for it truly being a dream. Even the original concept for the end points to just that. When the game's creator was creating the end, he originally called it the Sky Dimension, and said that this Sky Dimension would probably be a dream world that stood opposite of the Nether as a sort of heaven, and when you go to bed, there's a certain chance that you get dragged into the dream world instead. Then you will be able to do it on purpose later on. But due to performance issues with how the game's lighting in the Sky Dimension worked, they removed the sun and rebranded the area of the game to the end, which you no longer reach by sleeping but by jumping through another portal. A portal that when staring into it looks like it's a window across space via the star-like objects that you see in it. But speaking of lighting, one intriguing detail that still supports the end being a dream is to solve the end's lighting issues. Every part of the end is now evenly lit via no direct source of light like it would be in a dream. And along with the fact that you can't sleep in the end, phantoms are unable to spawn there, and when you beat the end, you wake up in your bed. Perhaps Steve is dreaming the end just like the game's creator had originally planned. If it wasn't for this one unavoidable detail about Steve. When playing through games like Minecraft, I usually end up dumping time into sorting my hoard of collected items into the appropriate container, and only dare to place similar items out of the thousands of shiny objects I've collected next to each other in the same chest. And Steve is just as much of a hoarder of items as the rest of us. The one thing Minecraft's dream theory has been unable to get around is upon beating the Ender Dragon, where the final portal opens up and the game's credits roll, we the player are given the specific message to wake up, where Steve then wakes up in his bed and still has all of the items in his inventory that he collected in the end, like the Lytra wings and the dragon egg that you get for beating the Ender Dragon. Steve waking up from a dream could explain how he is able to return to the overworld from the end, but more likely Steve suddenly appearing in bed is because the portal simply sent him back home and we're catching him lying down after the fight of his life, unless some incredible magic that we're yet to figure out is happening that allows Steve to take items from his dream into the overworld. The end also has to be real. But if this evidence isn't enough to convince you that Steve is really running around punching trees and slaying dragons with a sword, then let's look at the true meaning of Minecraft's ending poem to the player, with its intended message best said by its ending quote. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. This message isn't for Steve, but rather a heartfelt poem from the Minecraft development team to its players. Go explore and create your life as you have in Minecraft. Wake up from the dream of playing the game and build your world. Now, if you want to test your theory solving skills against some of the biggest theories out there, then check out these special episodes.